I want to talk about the Game Awards, and I think we've in the past. I don't know if we've ever done it on PvA radio, but in the past we've done predictions for the Game Awards, and we can certainly do that at some point in the future. But I don't think we've ever really had a conversation about the Game Awards and just gaming award shows in general, or gaming awards in general. And so I figured this would be as good an opportunity as any to kind of vault into that. So this week, Jeff Keighley, all by his lonesome. He's the Kojima of game award shows. In that, I think people look at the Game Awards and they don't think, man, this is a large team of people who come together to pull this together.
Yeah.
It's just Jeff Keighley in the back room with 17 cell phones trying to pull every trailer he can find. They released their nominees for all of their awards, and the date for, gosh, yes, your cookies are fine. When is the date for this? It's December something. But anyway,
Yeah, it is
here we go. Watch. December
12th.
They released all of their nominees, all their different categories. And, again, we'll probably do a prediction show where we'll predict some of these winners, but that's not the purpose of this. Beal for Real says, hosted by Jeff Keighley, written by Jeff Keighley, nominated by Jeff Keighley, and won by Jeff Keighley.
If you see one of my award shows, I have produced, designed, hosted every single aspect of it.
So I really, here at the top, I'm just going to open it to you. Was there anything specifically about any of these categories that jumped out to you? Anything that you felt like got particularly snubbed? A category you're interested in, more interested in than any other in terms of who's going to win it?
So I'm going to start off negative.
Here we go, baby. Let's go. Google Stadia sucks.
And the reward for community support, recognizing for outstanding community support, transparency, and responsiveness. I got to be honest, I was shocked to see Apex as the first game listed.
Hey, what is more transparent than calling your audience a bunch of freeloaders? Just telling us how you really feel.
I guess you're not wrong. So, I'm going to predict that they don't win that award, but
No.
it was nice of them to nominate Apex.
This site is terrible, by the way, in terms of how it scrolls.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of how really any of these companies have been incredibly transparent about anything. Like,
Bungie has a reputation for failing again and again at transparency.
Yeah, they have a very cyclical transparency where they're transparent and everybody's like, oh, we don't like anything you're being transparent about. And then they go into hiding and everyone's like, where are you, Bungie? We haven't heard from you. And then they go back to transparency. Final Fantasy 14, maybe I'm just not engaged in that community at all, but is Square like super transparent with that community?
I think they've just really supported the game well.
Mm-hmm. And Epic is driven almost exclusively by leaked content. So, and then I'm not, again, engaged with Rainbow Six either, but Ubisoft tends to be pretty open.
Yeah, standing outside looking in, it seems like Ubisoft is the clear winner in that category.
Yeah. I posted about this on Twitter, but I'm not sure what genre means anymore.
No, that means nothing. We can have a similar conversation as we did about sequels.
What an action game is, or an action adventure game is, based on the games that are in these categories.
Hold on, we'll go through them here. So your action games: Apex Legends, Astral Chain, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Devil May Cry 5, Gears 5, Metro Exodus. Go ahead.
So the definition of action game, according to the Game Awards, is for the best game in the action genre focused primarily on combat.
All right. So
I just want you to be aware of that when we go to action adventure game.
So action adventure is defined as the best action adventure game combining combat and traversal and puzzle solving. Borderlands 3, Control, Death Stranding, Resident Evil 2, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. Yeah, that's strange to me. Borderlands doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And maybe it's just because it's open world, it's in this category, or...
But it's all combat. Literally every second of that game is
There's
combat.
not much of a challenge of traversing the landscape.
Control and Resident Evil 2 are probably the more conventional action adventure games I would associate with. Like, it's a Metroidvania kind of. There's puzzles. You have to figure out how to get through this door, that door, kind of thing.
Did they not used to have, like, shooter?
They did have shooter, but I think everything is a shooter, so they have to whittle it down. I remember there being a shooter category in previous years, though. Is this the first year without one?
I think so, because I seem to remember shooter categories before, and I mean, there are some games in here that are not shooters that maybe there's not a ton. Hold on, let's go back.
Well, I think that the removal of shooter at this phase makes very little sense because I feel like this is the first point in many years where you had a selection of games that weren't shooters. Like everything's been a shooter for a really long time.
Yeah. Feel for Real says categories do suck a lot. There has to be a better way. Let's brainstorm this for a second here. This is unplanned, but let's brainstorm. If you were Jeff Keighley and solely put in charge of developing all portions of the Game Awards, all right, how would you break out these categories in a way that makes them more meaningful than what they currently are?
I don't really like rewarding genre. It's the reason I hate the Golden Globes, because there's so much fucking category and genre fraud at the Golden Globes. Like, look at whatever last year's best comedy nominations for movies or TV are, and it's not like none of those are pure comedy. Like, genre is just, especially genre is increasingly so flexible. I don't understand why Call of Duty is an action game. Like, that is the definition of a shooter, but I guess it is primarily focused on combat, so fits under their definition of action game. I just don't like once you start interrogating what genres and games they are, it sort of breaks down. I think it becomes kind of a pointless exercise of categorization.
Especially when so much of like the conversation about what makes a game good is how well it is able to combine genres. Like, how well is the traversal? How well is the combat executed? How good is the puzzle solving in the game? Like, we talk about it in this like kind of amorphic way.
Yeah, and I don't think like reviews hardly ever say this action adventure title anymore. They'll usually use more specific, like, I mean, you hear Metroidvania tossed around all the time. You'll hear Dark Souls, roguelite, Dark Soulsborne, whatever the fuck. I just don't know if these categories really serve a purpose anymore. I then would wonder what you'd replace them with. You'd actually have to reward the craft of making games as opposed to the genre, which is what the Oscars, Grammys do.
Yeah, because for the most part, I'm with you on eliminating genre, but then at the same time, I feel like there are a lot of games that would just get lost in the mix if you aren't careful, particularly fighting games. Like, that's a pretty distinct genre.
Right, but let's talk about that real quick. Let's talk about the games that are in this fighting game category. Dead or Alive 6, Jump Force, which I thought was pretty much exclusively, like unanimously reviled as not a good game.
No idea.
Mortal Kombat 11, Samurai Showdown, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So, is Dead or Alive 6 a new game?
I think the boundaries of what probably qualifies for the Game Awards is probably a little bit off center
it's like
of what the calendar year
middle
is.
Middle of November or something like that.
I think it probably does qualify. I think it came out at the beginning of this year or tail end of last year.
Feel for Real says Jump Force is no good. Go ahead, Larry.
where I was going with that though is I think you do get to a place of rewarding the craft of making the games. So one thing I would do, and this is only a slight nuance between genre, but maybe make some categories based on particular mechanics. So best fighting mechanics, like best game that employs fighting mechanics, and okay, like that's almost the same thing as genre, but you've got room for Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. That's got, like, essentially that's a fighting game in some places, you know, and so it'll get a little weird in which games you stack up against each other. But best constructed puzzles, like that might be one way to go, like just the particular aspects of
it's kind of like a technical achievement award almost.
Yeah, that's a little bit flashier, less flashy, I guess, for what the audience the Game Awards is targeting. I think that you run into that problem. I do think actually, and I'm sort of like talking counter to the point I was making, but you're right, Larry. I think, like, especially for specific genres that I don't feel always get represented in like Game of the Year, this award shows Game of the Year. Like I'd love to see for there to be a best horror game category. I'm actually surprised there isn't, because there are consistently a lot of pretty good horror games, even if they are smaller.
Especially this year.
Yeah, like Man of Medan doesn't get recognized because it doesn't really fit into any of the. It wouldn't get nominated for best narrative, but it's a great horror experience, and I think it deserves recognition for that. It's like simultaneously the categories are completely pointless, and they also don't have the categories that would give a lot of games the opportunity to actually get represented in an awards show. So I'm kind of caught in between, I guess. If you either got to commit to it or you don't.
I kind of like your direction there, Larry, with the mechanic idea, because the thing that makes gaming different is the agency within the medium that you don't have when you're watching television or watching a movie. And so how do we award people for giving players the most satisfying agency within the games? And I don't know of a better way to do it than, hey, this mechanic. Also, want to point out really quick, Fresh Indie Game is brought to you by Subway. They're like, hey, we really don't want to talk about indie games here, but if we're going to, can we sell out this segment?
Also, we're talking about, I don't know if you noticed the best family game nominees.
Wait,
all five of them are made by Nintendo.
Yes.
Nintendo knows their lane.
I know, but there are definitely other family games out there that aren't Nintendo games.
Yeah, you're right.
I know. Gears 5, for instance.
Gears 5, Death Stranding. Also, I haven't looked at how many categories Death Stranding is in, but not like it doesn't deserve some of those, but I think it's notable knowing Jeff Keighley's connection to Hideo Kojima.
Bill for Real's co-host Andrew Nimsgren, he tweeted earlier today his disappointment that Jedi Fallen Order was not included in Game of the Year as a contender there. And
did it reach the cutoff?
Yeah, did it even reach the? That's what I'm wondering. Because I don't think it's nominated for anything.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too. When exactly is the cutoff? Because
it's sometime in November. Okay. I know that.
So then Death Stranding would have just slid in, and that one would have just missed it, because those were about a week apart. Right?
Yeah. Let's see. You guys keep talking, and I'll figure out when that cutoff is.
For me, I'm glad you brought up the Man of Medan. I felt like it got snubbed and not showing up anywhere. Like,
yeah,
that game. It had its issues for sure, but it had a lot of really. I felt like it was a pretty innovative game. And particularly, I'm disappointed that I feel like it got snubbed in the category of best performance, because every one of those characters was played by a real actor being motion capped, and some of the acting in the game wasn't the best, but I thought for the most part the actors gave really good performances. And if Mads Mikkelsen and Norman Reedus were good enough to be included in this category, I definitely feel like some of the actors in Man of Medan should have been included in there as well.
The performance category is so complicated for the Game Awards. They always tend to. I think we've talked about gaming having an inferiority complex when it comes to its relationship to cinema, and I feel like the Game Awards especially is always evidence of that, because they're always leaping at the opportunity to nominate or award like Hollywood actors who make the slightest bit of interest in gaming. And this isn't to say that Norman Reedus or Mads Mikkelsen are bad in Death Stranding. I think they're both giving good performances. But it's a combination of that and rewarding literally the same talent every year. Like, Laura Bailey is good in Gears 5, but I don't think she gave one of the best performances of the year. She's just a name that usually pops up on these lists. I'm on the other side of that spectrum. I'm super happy to see Matthew Peretta from Control, because he gives simultaneously one of the most hilarious performances of the year and also one of the most like oddly heartbreaking performances of the year too. His arc throughout Control is so fascinating to watch, and all of his footage is not even rendered in the game engine. It's just him in educational videos and live action cutscenes, which is kind of cool. It's definitely different. But yeah, the performance category is always to me like evidence that gaming still hasn't really moved on past its inferiority complex.
Real for Real says Keighley and Kojima forever.
I'm surprised he didn't put himself in best performance.
Real quick, the cutoff is November 15th. It says games eligible for the Game Awards this year must be available for public consumption on or before November 15th, 2019.
Fallen Order came out on the 15th.
On the 15th, right? So that's strange.
Snubbed.
It may have been.
Boom. Sticking to my guns. I agree with Andrew.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
I wonder if he's offered any clarity on that.
I don't know.
And didn't they used to? Okay, yeah, this is interesting too. They introduced the category, I think 2 years ago, called Best Ongoing Game Award or something like that. They don't have that this year. And
no, I think they do.
Yeah, I saw it.
Do they?
Yeah, I saw it somewhere.
I'm looking through now.
Oh, yeah, they do. Here it is. It's called Ongoing Game. But they're also eligible for all other categories.
Yes.
Which seems strange.
Yeah. And but I think that kind of gets back to Cody's topic, just getting so complicated.
Mm-hmm. So you briefly touched on this, Cody, but I guess I want to part here with are the Game Awards important? Like, and if so, in what aspects are they important? Is it mainly from a commercial standpoint? Is it from a legitimacy standpoint? Are these really truly like coveted honors to win at this? Like what is the purpose of the Game Awards?
I like to see people honored for the work that they make, and even if that honor, even if it's not catching the eye of people outside of the sphere, I think it's cool to be able to get together and people that play games just, talk about the cool games that happened this past year and who excelled in doing any particular work. Do I feel like the Game Awards are accomplishing that well? I don't. But I think it is an important thing, and I'd like to see it done better.
Mm-hmm.
I ultimately think that all award shows are promotional in one way or another, and I think the Game Awards probably more so than any other show, regardless of medium. Like the Game Awards, Jeff Keighley has made a conscious effort to make it not just an award show, but like a sneak peek into the next year's and the years beyond kind of stream of content. And a lot of people tune in for the trailers just as much as they do for the awards in between those trailers. I also think just an inherent aspect of, and what I think actually award shows can do is highlight games that will probably might get swept under the rug or aren't like major titles. Like all the indie games represented for the Game Awards, it's a great opportunity for, even if they don't win, people will see their names, and it'll have the connotation of best indie game of the year, and people might be more inclined to check those out. It happens happens at the Oscars, it happens at the Golden Globes. Indie movies get like a second, like an actual life after those award shows, because people actually start to notice them a little bit more, or the mainstream starts to notice them a little bit more.
You mean I should watch this movie about this woman falling in love with fish?
That was a tough beat. That one was a tough beat that year. Guillermo del Toro also not nominated for Best Actor for Death Stranding.
Not even nominated as Best Actor for the role of Guillermo del Toro in the game.
You cut out there.
I said not even nominated for the Best Actor available to play Guillermo del Toro in the game.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. We can talk about that another time. But yeah, I think whether arguing over the importance of an award show is, I think, kind of pointless, because I think they're ultimately not as important as the art that they're awarding. But I think it can be, like you said, Larry, it's a great way to award and reward the hard work that goes into this. But if you're going to do that, I feel like the Game Awards could go a step in the direction of some of kind of the more developer focused award shows, and actually reward craft outside of just audio design, soundtrack, that kind of stuff. Like the Best Design Award, I don't really even know what it's actually rewarding. Because there's so many elements of design. Obviously it's rewarding kind of the game as a whole, but then you have to distinguish what's the difference between best designed game and best and game of the year. And I think that's when you can have interesting conversations about, like, Fortnite was arguably the game of the year, but it's not the best designed game last year. So I don't know. I think it's a great way to reward talent, but ultimately all award shows are kind of empty inside, much like me.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the Game Awards oftentimes get kind of a bad rap because, as we discussed already, it's really hard to figure out how to even organize these games to recognize them, and so it's an inherently flawed thing in and of itself. But I think a lot of awards shows tend to be very like self-aggrandizing in the way that they talk about their industries, and whereas I think the Game Awards, while yes, it is a promotional event, there's a lot of trailers and a lot of excitement, I also think there is a lot of heart in it to recognize the creators behind these games. And it's not just, well, let's get this actor on stage. We're talking about it's the developers whose faces we never get to see in the 30 hours that we spend with the game, or hundreds of hours that we spend with the game, depending on what you're playing. Like, we get a chance to see them, and I do think that that's cool. And I enjoy tuning into it, but I never buy a game because I'm like, oh damn, this thing won an award. Like, first of all, there's a million video game award shows, there's a million video game award lists, and so when you see Game of the Year recipient on a box, it may not mean much of anything, No. But I think as an event, it's always a fun, few hours to tune into, and I enjoy our show where we'll predict who wins in these categories, as well as we're like, wait, Link's Awakening is the same kind of game as Control?
Yeah, and it gives us stuff to shout about after,
exactly,
which is always fun.
In reality, that's all life is about, right? The more we can shout about, the better. And yes, Bill, for real, he says he only acted half. I think it was voiced different. It is a different voice actor. Did he even do the mocap for it?
No, it's just his likeness. It's the same with the character modeled after Nicholas Winding Refn. I don't know how I would feel about someone just taking my likeness and injecting someone else's voice and presence into it.
Noted.
It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird.
All right, guys.
Deep fakes.
something else that stood out to me that it's just interesting. Just another side effect of just the changing gaming culture is how much of this was dedicated to stuff around games. Like there are several esports categories, and also the best content creator category, which almost feels like who played these games the best this year. But I know there's more to it than that.
I'm so old. I'm like, I know 2 of these people maybe.
I don't know any of them.
Like I know Shroud and I know Courage. And the only reason I know Courage is because he made a music video for Ariana Grande, and Ariana Grande retweeted it, and he was streaming it when she retweeted it. That's the only reason I know who he is. I think he creates content for 100 Thieves, the esports organization. So
I think we all agree that the real content creator of the year was at Said Kid.
That's true. That's true. Very true.